Very good evening to all of you. Sincere thanks, Dr. Avai, for the introduction, and Dr. Akhil for setting the stage. Sincere thank to Endocrine Society, the members the organizing committee for this invitation. So, I will briefly discuss a very vast topic, that is the malnutrition and endocrinology. May I request to
Please
mute
mute yourself,
the,
please.
yeah,
Please
can
mute.
you please
I don't
mute?
know.
I mean,
Yeah, Doctor iPhone. There is one name is iPhone. So please mute
yeah, yeah.
mute
Okay.
yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll discuss a very vast topic of malnutrition endocrinology. To begin with, as a background, uh, we can have some evolutionary perspective to this malnutrition and the endocrine system. We know as the humans as well as other organisms developed on the surface of the earth mainly. So their nutritional requirement is actually usually met from the elements that are there on the earth crust. But as the evolution started at sea, and we humans are terrestrial animals, requirement of some nutrient, like as for example calcium, which is very much abundant in the sea, which is not that much available on the lands. So the human body developed a very strong and efficient conservative mechanism for the calcium, and deficiency of elements like calcium is very important, whereas phosphorus, which is also very important but is abundantly available on the lands. So deficiency of phosphorus is less harmful to human as a whole, as a nutrient. Second important part is that by the natural selection process, the endocrine system developed in such a way that they help in the energy conservation during the episode of starvation to uh, avoid the fatality. Thirdly, when there is a state of relative energy deficiency, the body diverts the energy for processes that are needed for immediate survival from the processes which are not needed for such kind of action like growth and gonadal function. So with a chronic malnutrition, be it absolute or relative, these functions are affected most. So with this background, uh, we'll start a discussion, but due to the vastness of this topic, I won't discuss the features of overnutrition as well as obesity. I think those can be discussed in the Q&A session which follows my talk. And regarding endocrine disruptors, which are also can be ingested in various forms. So those two things I won't discuss. So a very important aspect of malnutrition, as Dr. Akhil has already discussed, is a growth disorders, because nutrition has a fundamental role in determination of growth of an individual. And as I've said, the when there is deficiency, the growth deceleration occurs as a adaptive response, because a smaller body requires less amount of nutrition for survive, and it can conserve energy for the procedures which are more needed for short-term survival. And it is although becoming more less and less common, particularly in our part of the world, but still worldwide, the single most important cause of growth retardation today is poverty related malnutrition. Now this malnutrition as a whole can occur due to reduced intake or increased in requirement, or a combination of both. So the common causes include, other than the nutrient availability, are the condition like anorexia nervosa, chronic illness, malabsorption, nutrient loss like protein losing enteropathy, and various hypermetabolic states like chronic inflammation. All these things can lead to impairment of growth. This short stature, which occurs in malnutrition, can be due to various reasons. The most widespread, one of the widespread channels or enzyme that is present in our body is sodium potassium ATPase. And with energy deficiency, as this particular enzyme is very highly energy dependent, overall their activity is reduced, so it also affects the growth. There is also reduced rates of protein synthesis, which is the building block of our body. If the malnutrition is more severe, that actually leads to GH resistance. And also there is some contribution from various stress elements. I won't discuss those in detail. Regarding growth hormone resistance, it's mainly because of increased expression of FGF21 and SIRT1 in liver, which actually inhibits the STAT5, which is an important component of the second messenger JAK-STAT pathway of growth hormone action. So it leads to reduction of growth hormone action, leading to reduction of IGF-1, and this in turn stimulates the growth hormone secretion from pituitary. So in a bit severe kind of malnutrition, the typical problem with the growth hormone axis is increase in GH with low IGF-1 state. In a patient where there is additional protein deficiency, it has been seen that there is additional IGF-1 resistance as well on top of the less action of the GH on IGF-1 production. So there are problem in two levels when there is additional protein deficiency. How to diagnose? The typical clinical picture as shown by Dr. Akhil is that of severe undernutrition. So here the weightage is most severely impaired, which is much less than height and bone age, and all three are lesser than the chronological age with a gross reduction of height velocity. So this mimics the attenuated growth, whereas the mild undernutrition may mimic a condition like CDGP, like the weightage is maybe slightly less than height age, which is almost always equals to bone age, and both are slightly lesser than the chronological age. The height velocity is often normal or slightly reduced. Like this is a picture of mild undernutrition. This is the velocity and this is the absolute growth. And this is the picture of severe undernutrition. In addition, associated feature of malnutrition as described in our patient can also be there, which helps to pick up those cases. And before going into the detail of growth hormone axis, therefore, we usually evaluate for malnutrition as a cause of short stature. The second important part of the energy deficiency is the delayed puberty or hypogonadism. So this mainly occurs due to reduced food intake, either in protein quality or quantity, which can lead to the increased ghrelin level from the stomach and reduced leptin signal from the adipose tissue, and they both leads to reduction in kisspeptin expression, which in a peripubertal children can lead to delay in onset of puberty, and in an adult individual, as you know, the kisspeptin is also needed for the stimulation of GnRH, secretion of GnRH. So this is also reduced. So both in a peripubertal as well as in adult, there is hypogonadism, and there is some additional effect of low IGF-1, which ultimately leads to delayed puberty. And in nutritional deficiency, as we know, it's a state of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. In addition to these two, there are some problems in cortisol axis as well. There is increase in CRH due to stress, which in turn leads to increase in ACTH and increase in cortisol production. Whereas the thyroid function shows a picture similar to the sick euthyroid syndrome, depending on the severity of malnutrition. So with a more severe kind of malnutrition, the T4 levels comes down and TSH increases, whereas T3 level can be low in mild, moderate, or severe undernutrition. When we discuss the energy deficiency, a part we should also discuss, that is the reversion from that, or refeeding syndrome. When a patient who is malnourished due to some reason, particularly due to severe malnutrition, if he or she is suffering, and the patient, when the refeeding is done, it leads to increased secretion of insulin for anabolic purpose, which leads to rapid intracellular shift of the various electrolytes as well as thiamine, which ultimately leads to severe hypokalemia, hypomagnesium, and hypophosphatemia, in addition to other defects. So that leads to typical refeeding syndrome, and this should be recognized and treated early because this is a medical emergency. Another very important endocrine aspect of refeeding is refeeding gynecomastia. There is increase in LH after a period of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism that occurs in chronic malnutrition, and this brisk rise of LH leads to increase in Leydig cell aromatase activity, which increases the EA ratio, the estrogen-androgen ratio, and which leads to refeeding gynecomastia. This is also known as second puberty syndrome. There is another aspect of malnutrition, that is the maternal malnutrition, which can affect the fetus. Both nutrient deficiency and nutrient excess can affect the fetus. Nutrient deficiency mainly acts by increasing glucocorticoid exposure. As I've said, there is increase in CRH, which ultimately leads to increase in cortisol, whereas nutrient excess can lead to oxidative stress, which subsequently lead to metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So type 2 diabetes can occur in offspring due to the malnutrition in mother, and that is also contributed by thrifty phenotype, and there is some epigenetic modulation due to altered nutrient environment in the in utero state. One of the malnutrition related diabetes, although a controversial one, is malnutrition modulated diabetes mellitus. It is not often described in the Western literature, but that has been reported many a times from the topics and there are different consensus statement and guideline from various tropical area, including India. One of them is the Kotak consensus in the 90s. The usual clinical features are the young age of onset between 10 to 30 years. The BMI is usually low, it's usually less than 16. History of malnutrition is there since childhood, and there is severe hyperglycemia, usually in the tune of more than 250 milligrams per day. But despite that, the ketosis is usually absent. Insulin requirement is usually very high, and there is no pancreatic abnormality on imaging, which helps to differentiate it from the pancreatic cause. And depending on those clinical and radiological features, scoring system has been proposed where the maximum possible score is 16, and if the score of 13 or more is present, then we can diagnose the patient as malnutrition modulated diabetes mellitus. A very important nutritional endocrine entity is nutritional bone disease. Now, among them, the most important one is nutritional ricket and osteomalacia. There are several studies from India which showed that in India, even now, those studies which I have taken was done in the last decade, and the prevalence of nutritional rickets seems to be very, very high. One of the study which looked at the clinical criteria with a mean age of 2.6 years showed the prevalence is around 16%. Whereas another study done on infants in the AIIMS New Delhi, who looked at the radiological features of ricket, has seen an astounding 1/3 of the neonatal population of this age group is suffering. The infants of 2.5 to 3.5 months of age, the infants are suffering, 1/3 of them are suffering from rickets in the radiologic form. And there are another large survey which has been done on the basis of X-ray in children and adolescents from 1 to 18 years of age. There also about 0.3% of them is having rickets. So nutritional rickets is a very important problem in India. And the most common cause of nutritional ricket of less than 6 months of age is maternal vitamin D deficiency. More than 6 months of age, it's usually due to vitamin D deficiency. And after stoppage of breastfeeding, it is usually due to deficiency of calcium and vitamin deficiency in various kind of combination. And the manifestation of ricket actually depends on the extent of the bone mineral defect, is actually dependent on both the vitamin D as well as calcium levels. If both are normal, or one is normal, the other is insufficient, there is usually no problem. But if both are severely deficient, or one is insufficient, the other being deficient, that can lead to defect in osteoid formation, leading to rickets or osteomalacia. Whereas if one of them is normal, the other one is deficient, or both are in the insufficient range, that can lead to osteoporosis in adults. So this is very important to note, that both calcium and vitamin D plays a very important role in development of rickets, osteomalacia, as well as osteoporosis in adults. This is the standard RDA, which is proposed by the NIN. The Indian guideline, the RDA is much less than the Western counterpart of USA IOM, but the RDA is quite similar in the pregnant and lactating individuals. Regarding vitamin D, it's around 400 IU per day throughout the lifespan. Besides the calcium and vitamin D, several other nutrients like phosphorus, potassium, vitamin K, C, A, magnesium, and others are important nutrients for bone function. But as I've said, the dietary deficiency of these are very rare. So for all practical purpose, their supplementation has not proven to be beneficial for bone health, and they are not generally recommended, but they may lead to individual cases of bone mineralization defect. Excess of sodium can lead to osteoporosis, mainly because of increased calcium excretion through kidneys, plus there is slight elevation of PTH level, which can also lead to bone absorption. Another very important nutritional bone disease is fluorosis. As you can see, it's widely prevalent in India, but some areas are spared. In and around our place, we rarely see a patient of fluorosis, but in some bordering district of West Bengal, which is the border to the Jharkhand and Bihar, there are some cases of fluorosis. The soil fluoride content is very high. And also in Odisha, in Northeast, the fluorosis is not uncommon in various areas. The fluorosis as well as osteoporosis and osteomalacia. And there is one interesting study which suggested that the genetic polymorphism actually determines which individual will develop osteopetrosis and which individual develop osteoporosis with excess fluoride in water and other food. This is the typical manifestation of fluorosis. This is a dental picture, and this is the bowing. And this is the typical increased density of bones along with the intraosseous calcification, which is characteristic of fluorosis. Iodine deficiency is a very, very important problem worldwide. In all ages, it can lead to goiter, and in severe cases, hypothyroidism. There are several problems in the fetal life, like abortion and stillbirth. In neonatal life, it can cause infant mortality and endemic retinism. In childhood or adolescent, can lead to impaired mental function and delayed physical development. Even in adults, it can lead to impaired mental function, and the patients can develop multinodular goiter, which is usually non-toxic, but with supplementation of iodine, with iodine sufficiency, they can develop the toxic multinodular goiter. But fortunately, more than 90% of household is now covered with the iodized salt, and about 80% of this iodized salt is of high quality. So this is very reassuring. And there are various data from various parts of India that iodine deficiency is becoming less and less common. And we have our own data. This is a hospital-based study which we did with the patients of type 2 diabetes. We looked at the various thyroid function, and that included the urinary iodine level. Very interestingly, none of those patients of type 2 diabetes actually had urine iodine level of less than 100 microgram per liter. So this is a very encouraging part. Another very important mineral from the thyroid aspect is the selenium. Selenium deficiency can affect the thyroid function in various ways. It can affect the function of the glutathione peroxidase, which is present in a very high concentration in thyroid gland. It is also a very important component of deiodinase. It has been proposed that selenium deficiency can lead to autoimmune thyroid disease as well. And there are various studies on autoimmune thyroid disease on selenium supplementation, but the results are inconsistent, and the selenium supplementation is not generally recommended. Whereas in thyroid-associated orbitopathy, UGOGO recommends that in a mild orbitopathy of a relatively recent onset, you can try 6-month selenium supplementation up to 100 micrograms per day. But again, it has been proposed that possibly this may be useful in areas where there is the soil is deficient in selenium. The maternal combined iodine and selenium deficiency said to be lead to the myxodematous cretinism, which has been reported in the countries like Congo, whereas isolated severe maternal iodine deficiency leads to neurologic cretinism. So to summarize, both excess and deficiency of both micro and macronutrients are closely associated with various endocrine disorders. Growth, gonadal function, both in periadolescent and in adults, thyroid function, glucose metabolism, and bone structures are commonly affected in various forms of malnutrition. And not only that, the maternal malnutrition itself may affect the endocrine function of the offspring in the long run. Thank you for your patient hearing.